For 3 years, they excluded my kids from every family event. This time, I showed up anyway. Her sister opened the door, looked at my children, and said, "Sorry, wrong house." Closed it in our faces. Hours later, her dad texted, "We told her grandparents your kids don't exist." I replied, "Understood." Then froze the wedding fund and mailed her grandparents a letter with every photo they'd never been shown. They didn't just exclude us, they deleted my kids. For 3 years, Emma and Nick were treated like a glitch in someone else's family photo. Cropped out, blurred, denied. And I kept telling myself it was awkwardness, tradition, old-fashioned thinking, anything that sounded less cruel than the truth. Then this time, I showed up anyway. Laura's sister opened the door, looked straight at my children, and said, "Sorry, wrong house," and closed it in our faces. Not a slam, not even a dramatic gesture. Just a casual shut like we were a flyer she didn't want. Emma's smile died so fast, it looked like someone turned off a light. Nick's fingers tightened around the cookie box we'd baked that morning. His peace offering. His little boy faith that kindness fixes things. I stood there on that porch, hearing the music inside, smelling catered food through the crack that was already gone, and something inside my chest hardened into a clean, cold shape. I took my phone out, ready to call Laura, ready to ask what was happening, when a message popped up from her father. "Richard, we told her grandparents your kids don't exist." My eyes reread it slow, like my brain couldn't accept English anymore. Not we didn't invite them. Not we didn't want complications. Not we're sorry. No, your kids don't exist. I typed back one word. Me. Understood. Then I froze the wedding fund. And I mailed her grandparents a letter with every photo they'd never been shown. "Dad," Emma asked in the car on the way there, "do you think Aunt Kelly will like my dress?" Emma was 9, all knees and hope, wearing a simple white dress Laura helped pick. She'd brushed her own hair twice, then asked me to redo her braid because she wanted it neat, like grown-ups. Nick, 7, sat beside her, holding a shoebox lined with tissue paper. Inside were cookies shaped like little flowers, lightly iced. He'd insisted on making them. "So they'll know we're nice," he'd said the night before, serious as a judge. I glanced in the rearview mirror. "They'll love it," I lied automatically, because I've learned how easily adults lie when they want children to stay soft. I'm Bruce. I'm a physical therapist. I spend my days with people who are scared of pain, scared of movement, scared of trusting their own bodies again. I know how to talk someone through trembling steps. I know how to say, "It's okay. I'm here. Breathe." I should have been better at saying that to my own kids. We pulled into the driveway of Laura's parents' house. Big lawn, white tent, chairs in perfect rows. The kind of setup that screamed, "This is what a family looks like when it's winning." Emma sat up straighter. Nick adjusted the box on his lap like it was a sacred offering. I rang the bell. Kelly opened the door. Her eyes swept over me like I was mildly inconvenient. Then they dropped to the kids, like she was checking for mud on shoes. Her lips curved. "Sorry, wrong house." And the door shut. For a second, there was only the muffled sound of laughter inside, like we were standing outside a bubble we'd never be allowed into. Emma whispered, "Daddy." Maybe she thought. Nick's voice came out tiny. "Did we go to the wrong place?" I bent down, forcing my face into calm. "No," I said. "We're at the right house." Emma's eyes got wet. "Then why?" I didn't answer, because the answer would have been, because they can. Because they have been. I led them back to the car, and that's when Richard's text arrived. The thing people don't understand about being erased is that it usually happens politely. It starts with, "Oh, we didn't realize you'd bring the kids." It continues with, "It's adults only this time." Then maybe the kids would be bored anyway. Then the invitations stop coming. When I met Laura, she made me believe she was different. My first wife, Megan, died when Nick was 2. A drunk driver hit her on the highway. One moment she was dropping off groceries. The next, I was standing in an ER hallway with a doctor explaining words that didn't fit into my life. After that, life became survival. Daycare schedules, bedtime routines, grief that arrived in waves, and 2 small faces that looked at me like I was the whole world. When I met Laura, she didn't flinch from the fact that I came with history. Your kids are part of you, she said early on. If I'm with you, I'm with them. I wanted to believe her so badly I didn't notice how quickly she added conditions once her family entered the scene. Laura's parents, Deborah and Richard, looked like they were born in a catalog. Clean, expensive, confident. Their house was always staged. Even their kitchen looked like no one ever cooked. The first time they met Emma and Nick, Deborah kissed the air near their cheeks, not their actual skin. "That's lovely," she said when Emma shyly handed her a drawing. Then she set it on the counter like a receipt. Richard shook my hand too firmly and said, "You seem stable, Bruce." Laura needs stability. It sounded like a compliment. It wasn't. At first, I excused it. They were old school. They were private. They were adjusting. Then the first holiday happened. "Just us this year," Laura said, avoiding my eyes. "Mom wants it small." "It's Christmas," I said. "The kids, they'll have more fun at home," she insisted. I should have pushed harder. Instead, I did what I always do when someone I love looks stressed. I took the weight. "Okay," I said. "We'll do our own Christmas here." We did. Emma helped hang ornaments. Nick put a star on top and nearly fell off the stool. But later that night, Laura came home smelling like wine and perfect family photos. And she didn't talk much. She just scrolled through pictures on her phone and sighed like something was missing. Next came birthdays, barbecues, a baby shower. Always not for kids. Always not this time. Emma stopped asking after a while. That's the part that still hurts the most. When children stop asking, they aren't being mature. They're learning rejection as a law of nature. Then, a year into our marriage, Kelly got engaged. Deborah hosted a dinner. The house glowed with candles. Everyone wore smiles like armor. Deborah poured wine and said sweetly, "Weddings are expensive." Richard nodded. "Kelly deserves something nice." Laura squeezed my knee under the table, and then Deborah looked right at me. "Bruce, you're practical. You understand budgets. We were thinking it would mean a lot if the family could help." A number appeared, not asked as a question, presented as a fact. They called it the wedding fund. A shared pool for the family. Laura's family treated it like a test. Contribute or be exposed as selfish. I hesitated. It was a lot. Laura leaned in and whispered, "If we help, they'll finally see we're all one unit." One unit. That phrase should have warned me, because one unit, in their minds, didn't include my children. I opened a separate account anyway. I started depositing monthly. Not because I loved Kelly, not because I cared about centerpieces, but because I wanted the invisible wall between my kids and Laura's family to crack. I told myself, money won't buy love, but maybe it can buy access. Maybe it can buy a seat at the table. Maybe it can buy my kids a place where they aren't treated like a secret. Then, 6 months before the wedding, the next rule appeared. Laura came home late, tense. "Mom wants us to sit at a different table," she said. "What?" I blinked. "Not with them," she clarified quickly. "Just off to the side. It's complicated." "Why?" I already knew. She swallowed. "They don't want questions." "Questions about what?" I asked. "That I have kids? That you married me?" Laura's voice snapped. "Bruce, don't start. It's one day." "One day," I repeated. "It's been 3 years." She rubbed her forehead. "You don't understand my family." I stared at her. "No, I understand them. I don't understand you." That night, I lay awake thinking about my kids, standing outside rooms they weren't allowed into. I thought about how often I'd chosen peace over their dignity. And I realized something. I'd been trying to rehabilitate a relationship that kept re-injuring my children. As a physical therapist, if someone keeps stepping on a broken ankle, you don't keep saying, "Maybe next time it'll be gentler." You protect the injury. You set boundaries. You stop letting people call pain normal. After the door closed on us, I drove to a park instead of going home. I didn't want the kids to sit in their rooms wondering what was wrong with them. We bought hot chocolate. We sat on a bench. Emma stared into her cup like she could drown in it. Nick kept opening the cookie box, then closing it again. "Dad," Nick whispered finally, "did Aunt Kelly forget us?" Emma's lip trembled. Maybe she thought we were bad? I felt something twist deep in my chest. No, I said carefully. Listen to me. You didn't do anything wrong. You are not the problem. Emma's eyes filled anyway. Then why didn't she let us in? Because she's cruel. Because her mother trained her. Because they want a clean story. Because you remind them the world isn't perfect. I didn't say any of that. Instead, I took their hands, one on each side, and said the truth they needed. Sometimes adults do ugly things to protect their image. That's not about you. That's about them. My phone buzzed. Richard's text. We told her grandparents your kids don't exist. I stared at it, my jaw tightening so hard my teeth hurt. My hands stayed steady. Years of working with injured bodies taught me control. But inside, something snapped cleanly, like a tendon finally tearing after too much strain. Laura called minutes later. Where are you? Her voice was sharp. My mom says you showed up and caused drama. Drama? I said. Kelly told my kids wrong house and shut the door. A pause. Too long. Bruce, it's stressful today. I cut her off. Your dad texted me. Read it. I forwarded it. Silence. Then Laura exhaled like she was drowning. He didn't mean it like that. Laura, I said, my voice low, there is no other way to mean your kids don't exist. She started crying. Or maybe she started pretending to cry. Hard to tell. What do you want me to do? I stared at my children, sitting quietly like they were trying not to take up space. I want you to stop letting them erase my kids, I said. Today. Not tomorrow. Not after the wedding. It's not that simple, she whispered. It is, I replied. You're just scared. Then I texted Richard, one word. Understood. And I did what I should have done the first time they made my kids feel small. I opened the banking app. The wedding fund account sat there like a joke. I froze it. Then I transferred every cent to the account labeled Emma and Nick. Future. Money that once fed their fantasy would now feed my children's reality. Then I wrote the letter. Not to Deborah, not to Kelly, not even to Richard. To the grandparents, the ones they'd lied to so easily. Because if they were willing to pretend my kids didn't exist, then the truth needed to arrive like a thunderclap. I printed photos. Hundreds. Emma's missing front tooth. Nick learning to ride a bike. Our goofy Halloween costumes. Christmas mornings. School awards. The day Nick finally swam without floaties. The night Emma fell asleep on my shoulder after watching a movie. I included the card Emma had made for Grandma, the one she'd hoped to hand over today. I wrote a short note on the back of each photo. Date, place, one sentence. Then I mailed it all. When I got home, Laura was waiting like a storm. What did you do? She demanded. Eyes red, mascara smudged. I protected my kids, I said. You humiliated us, she snapped. Your family humiliated children, I replied. I'm just refusing to pay for it. Her face twisted. That money wasn't just yours. I nodded. You're right. It was ours. And I'm choosing to spend ours on the people who live in this house. You're punishing them. No, I said, stepping closer. I'm applying consequences. There's a difference. She shook her head, trembling. My mom says you're controlling. She says you stop quoting your mother, I said, calm and deadly. Tell me what you believe. Laura opened her mouth, closed it. That silence told me everything. I took a slow breath, the same way I coach patients through painful stretches. Here are the boundaries, I said. Listen carefully. 1. My kids are not a secret. 2. No one in your family gets access to this home or our lives if they treat my children like shame. 3. I will not fund people who erase them. Ever again. If you can't stand with me on that, then you can't stand with me at all. Her eyes widened. Are you threatened to leave? I'm stating reality, I said. You've been choosing them over my kids for 3 years. Today, I'm choosing my kids over their comfort. The fallout was immediate. Deborah called 15 times that night. Richard sent messages dripping with moral superiority. Richard, you made a commitment. Richard, a real man honors his word. Richard, you embarrassed us. Richard, this will affect Laura's relationship with the family. I didn't respond because my children's dignity mattered more than Laura's family image. Kelly posted vague captions online about betrayal and toxic people. Friends of the family messaged Laura. Some messaged me. Most of them didn't ask what happened. They just assumed the script. I was the villain because I stopped paying. Meanwhile, in my own house, Emma started waking up at night. I'd hear her padding down the hallway. She'd stand in the doorway of my room like a ghost. "Dad," she'd whisper, "can I sleep here?" So I'd scoot over and let her curl up beside me, small and warm, like she was trying to hide inside safety. Nick stopped wanting to bake for anyone outside. He shoved the cookie cutters into a drawer and said quietly, "They don't deserve it." That sentence, coming from a 7-year-old, made my stomach churn with anger I didn't show him. Instead, I did what I do best. Rehab. Not a knee, not a shoulder. A childhood. We made new routines. Saturday mornings became pancakes and park time. Sundays became our own family dinner, where everyone got to speak and be heard. I also opened a therapy savings plan for them, not because they were broken, but because I refused to let someone else's cruelty shape their future unchecked. A week after I mailed the package, my phone rang from an unknown number. "Hello?" I answered, a soft elderly voice. "Is this Bruce?" "Yes, this is Margaret," she said. "Laura's grandmother." My throat tightened. "I received your letter," she continued, "and I don't know how to say this without crying." She paused, and I heard her take a breath. They told us Laura didn't have children in her family yet. That it was complicated. That it wasn't appropriate to discuss." My hand clenched around the phone. "I looked at those photos," she said, over and over. "Your little girl has the brightest smile. And your boy, he looks like a kind soul." Emma, listening nearby, froze when she heard me say, "Margaret." She stared at me with cautious curiosity. Margaret's voice grew stronger. "I want to meet them, if you'll allow it." I swallowed. "Yes," I said. "You can." When we arrived at Margaret and Harold's house, it felt different from Deborah's perfect showroom. It smelled like cinnamon and old books. There were actual family pictures on the walls. Messy, imperfect, real. Margaret opened the door and stared at my kids like she was trying to memorize them. Then she crouched down and said gently, "Emma?" Emma's eyes widened. "Yes." Margaret took her hand like it was precious. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know." Emma's face crumpled, and she cried. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent tears that said, "Finally, someone sees me." Harold, the grandfather, cleared his throat roughly and held out his hand to Nick. "Hi, young man," he said. "I'm Harold." Nick hesitated, then shook his hand. Harold's eyes were wet. "Well," he said softly, "it's about time." Inside, Margaret served tea and cookies like it was a sacred ritual. She asked questions about school, about favorite colors, about what games they liked. Questions no one in Deborah's house ever bothered to ask. And then, as if she couldn't help herself, Margaret said, "Why would anyone pretend you didn't exist?" Emma's voice came out small. "Maybe we're not real enough." I felt my heart stop for a second. I leaned forward. "Emma," I said gently, "you are real. You're more real than anyone who needs lies to feel important." Margaret looked at me then, not at Laura's husband, not at the financial contributor, just at a father. "I'm glad you sent that letter," she said. "I'm ashamed it took you to tell us the truth." That day, when we left, Emma waved from the car window like she'd gained something she'd secretly wanted her whole life. Nick whispered, "Dad, Grandma Margaret is nice." I nodded. Yes, she is. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt something loosen inside me. Because my kids weren't invisible anymore. Not to everyone. Laura didn't come with us that first time. She said she couldn't handle the drama. But she watched Emma and Nick come home lighter, smiling, and something shifted in her eyes. Something like guilt finally turning into recognition. Later that night, she said quietly, "I didn't realize how bad it was." I stared at her. "You saw them shut the door for years," I said. "You just kept calling it complicated because it was easier than calling it cruelty." She cried. Real tears this time. I was scared, she admitted. My family, they punish people who go against them. I nodded. And my kids were the price you paid to stay safe. She flinched because it was true. Months passed. Kelly's wedding happened without my money. It wasn't as extravagant. The tent was smaller. The flowers were cheaper. The photos still looked perfect online because perfection is always a filter away. But the panic behind it was real. Deborah stopped calling after I blocked her number. Richard sent one last message. Richard, one day you'll regret choosing pride over family. I stared at it, then deleted it, because I didn't choose pride. I chose my children. Emma started drawing again with a kind of joy I hadn't seen in a long time. One day she handed me a picture. Me, her, Nick, and two older figures with gray hair. Everyone was holding hands. Above it, she wrote, "Real family." Nick asked to bake again, but this time only for people who are kind. He brought cookies to Margaret and Harold. He brought cookies to my clinic staff. He brought cookies to the neighbor who always waved. Not one cookie for Deborah. And that was fine. Laura slowly began to change, not because I yelled, but because consequences forced her to see what she'd been helping to do. One evening, I overheard her on the phone with Deborah. "No," Laura said, voice shaking. "I'm not doing this anymore." I paused, listening. "They're children," she continued. "Emma and Nick are Bruce's children. And that means they're part of my life. If you can't respect that, then you don't get access to me." Deborah's voice hissed through the phone, unintelligible, angry. Laura swallowed. "And stop saying they don't exist. That's disgusting." She hung up and stood there breathing like she'd run a marathon. I didn't rush to comfort her. I didn't praise her. I just said quietly, "That's what it sounds like when you stop being afraid." Laura nodded, tears in her eyes. "I don't know if they'll ever forgive me." I looked toward the hallway where my kids were laughing over a board game. "Forgiveness isn't something you deserve," I said. "It's something you earn. Over time. With actions." Later that night, Emma came into my room holding her phone. "Dad," she said, hesitant. "Grandma Margaret texted me a heart. A heart. Something so small. Yet Emma looked like she'd been handed proof of her own worth." "Is it normal," she asked softly, "to have grandparents who want you?" My throat tightened. I pulled her into a hug. "Yes," I whispered. "It's normal. And it's what you've always deserved. That's the thing people don't tell you. Boundaries aren't cruelty. They're care." I'm a physical therapist. I teach people that healing sometimes hurts. That you don't regain strength by pretending the injury isn't there. You regain it by respecting the damage, protecting it, and rebuilding the right way. My kids were injured by rejection. And I finally stopped letting the same people reopen the wound. So no, I don't regret freezing the wedding fund. I don't regret the letter. I don't regret making the truth loud enough to shake their lies. Because the moment Richard texted, "We told her grandparents your kids don't exist," something in me became unmovable. If you can erase my children with words, then I can bring them back with proof. Photos, names, dates, smiles, reality. And the best part? The grandparents didn't reject them. They welcomed them, which meant the lie had never been for their sake. It was always for Deborah and Richard's image, for Kelly's fantasy, for a family that wanted perfection more than people. Well, they can keep their perfect pictures. I'll keep my real kids. And a home where no one ever opens the door, looks at them, and says, "Sorry, wrong house." Because this time I made sure everyone knew exactly who lived in mine.